Welcome to the XTV News Channel. Dear friends, stories of treasures, sunken ships, or ancient cities deep in the ocean floor have always been the subject of attraction and controversy for many people. Among those things, Atlantis City is known as the pinnacle of science and technology, and as the most prosperous place in the world at that time. Where anyone would like to live, suddenly disappeared overnight. So what's so special about the existence, development, as well as the strange disappearance of this city? Please join us to find out and explore right in today's video. And don't forget to express your thoughts on this terrifying disappearance of this city. Myths about Atlantis. First, let's learn about the legend of Atlantis. There have been many legends about the existence of this mysterious city, in which there is a legend that has been spread by many people to this day. Atlantis is the seat of the king of the seas, the god Poseidon. Neptune to the Romans, was a son of the Titans, giants, Cronus and Rhea, and the brother of the supreme god Zeus. Poseidon's attribute is a trident. With it he could stir the waters and split rocks. Anyone who has seen Aquaman movies is sure to know this. Legend has it that the god Poseidon traveled around the world looking for an island to rule, until he found an isolated island, inhabited by the most beautiful and intelligent people in the world. There, he fell in love with Cleito, an ordinary woman with a beautiful appearance and rare intelligence. Makes the boys die at first sight. And since then he has turned this place into the famous city of Atlantis. This is where god Poseidon built to impress the beautiful Cleito. And of course, gifts to impress crush are impossible, take it lightly. Atlantis is an architectural wonder with enormous structures built around Cleito Hill. So how big is Atlantis? Poseidon's flirtatious gift are not cheap things. According to the description of Plato, the ancient Greek philosopher, the island is larger than both Libya and Asia Minor combined, and is on the Atlantic Ocean. The area is about several million square kilometers. Oh, like this. Why wouldn't Cleito fall for it? It can be said that this giant city is the result of the immortal love of the most gallant sea god on earth. So there are many boys in here who are willing to do everything for the one they love, like this mighty sea god. Poseidon and Cleito gave birth to 5 twins. The firstborn son, who was named Atlas, became the first leader of Atlantis. Atlantis is named after this first king. The 10 children of Poseidon built countless temples, including the main one on Cleito Hill with a golden statue made in the image of the sea god Poseidon, riding a 6-wings horse. The temple had a roof that was so high that it pierced clouds. In Atlantis it is not just humans, but there are also deities, demigods, and animal man. Their lifespans are much higher than people of today. The city was so prosperous that there was no need to trade with the outside. They grow food by themselves, raise livestock and poultry. In addition, the Atlantis also possess many rare crystals that can be used to create energy for the whole city and heal. It is the mystery and unbelievable riches that make many people want to find Atlantis. Atlantis in ancient texts. The Timaeus and Critias of Plato contain a chronicle of Atlantis. The story comes from Solon, the lawgiver of ancient Greece, who traveled to Egypt about 560 BC. The hieratic college of the goddess Neith of Se, protectress of learning, confided to Solon that its archives were thousands of years old. These records spoke of a continent beyond the Pillars of Hercules which sank about 9560 BC. Plato does not confuse Atlantis with America, as he distinctly says that there was a continent west of Atlantis. He speaks of an ocean beyond the Straits of Gibraltar and calls the Mediterranean only a harbor. It is in that ocean, the Atlantic, that he places an island continent larger than Libya and Asia Minor put together. There was a fertile plain in the center of Atlantis, protected by lofty mountains from the northern winds. The climate was subtropical and Atlanteans gathered tow crops a year. The country was rich in minerals, metals and agricultural produce. Industry, crafts and sciences flourished in Atlantis. It was proud of many fine harbors, docks and canals. Plato's mention of commercial links with the outside world indicates the use of ocean-going ships. The people of Atlantis constructed their buildings of red, white and black stone. The temple of Cleito and Poseidon was surrounded by a golden fence, while the walls were made of silver and the building decorated with golden ornaments. It was there that the 10 kings of Atlantis held their assemblies. On the basis of Plato's data, the army and navy totaled 1,210,000 men. This figure suggests a multi-million population. During the last period of Atlantean history of which Plato speaks, the nation was ruled by the royal descendants of Poseidon. Shortly before its end, the Atlantean Empire entered on a path of imperialism with the intention of expanding its colonies in the Mediterranean. However, it appears from the account of Plato that in an earlier epoch the Atlanteans practiced gentleness and wisdom. To quote him, they despised everything but virtue, they thought lightly on the possession of gold and other property, which seemed a burden to them. Neither were they intoxicated by luxury, nor did wealth deprive them of their self-control. The people of Atlantis prized fellowship and friendship above their worldly possessions. In the face of this contempt for private property and the sociality of Atlanteans, did they have a system of socialism in a bygone age? If so, the presence of a moneyless economy in the land of the Incas would be only natural, as Peru was, in all likelihood, a fragment of the Atlantean state. According to Virgil's Georgics and Tibullus' Elegies, land in ancient times was held in common. Memories of a democracy in a former cycle were perpetuated in ancient Greece and Rome in the festivals of the Cronia and Saturnalia when masters and slaves drank and danced together for a day. The 5,000-year Ol. D. Enkidu and the poem of Utu of Sumer express lament for the lost social system in which there were no liars, no sickness, nor old age. Plato tells of the moral downfall of Atlanteans when avarice and egoism got the upper hand. Then Zeus, perceiving that an honorable race was in a most wretched state, and that they aggressed wantonly against the whole Europe and Asia, inflicted a terrible punishment on them. In the words of the Greek philosopher, the warlike men in a body sank into the earth and the island of Atlantis in like manner disappeared and was sunk beneath the sea. Anticipating skepticism from his readers in future ages, Plato assures us that his story is strange, yet perfectly true. Today his narrative is receiving more and more corroboration from science. Description of spiritualists and reincarnated people about Atlantis. Atlantis continent follows the general outline of all the others now in manifestation upon the Earth. The surface is mostly level, consisting of vast fertile plains. But to the west, north and east the country becomes mountainous. From these mountains, as a watershed, a river with its branches drains nearly the whole length of the continent. Its waters, diverted through an artificial canal and locks, forms the great port of the city of Atlantis, which extends from this canal, northeast of the central portion of the continent, quite up to the foothills of the elevated portion of the country. Among these mountains has been built the great temple dedicated to Sea God, who is the One, the All. The mountains have springs of hot and cold water which act as natural reservoirs. From them the water is conveyed by stone pipes to the public baths and to the private residences of such citizens as choose to avail themselves of the privilege under certain conditions. In the center of the city are the royal palaces, and these are protected by 3 immense canals, which are built entirely around them, with 2 intervening zones of land. These canals are connected with the Great Sea by another canal 300 feet wide and 100 feet deep and 6 miles long to connect with the port. The Atlanteans had efficient systems of heating and lighting, and communications with other lands were well established. Light rays of many kinds, such as laser beams, were discovered and controlled, including the death ray. Liquid air was manufactured, also compressed air and rubber. Metal alloys of brass, aluminum and uranium, unknown to us, were used in the construction of air and watercraft, including the submarine. The telephone and the elevator were in common use. Radio and television were highly developed, as was the amplification of light rays in telescopic observation and photographing at long distances. Many types of bodily adornment came to be fabricated. Soldiering and law enforcement became a part of the political scene. But the most notable scientific accomplishment of the Atlanteans was the harnessing of the sun's energy. Developed originally as a means of spiritual communication between the finite and the infinite, the huge reflective crystals were first known as the Tuaui stone. Later, as its use was improved upon over the centuries, it expanded to become a generator of power or energy, radiating across the land without wires. Then it became known as the Firestone, or the Great Crystals. Set in the Temple of the Sun in Poseidia, the Firestone was the central power station of the country. Basically, it was a large cylindrical glass or stone of many facets, capped with a mechanism at one end. It was suspended in the center of the building and insulated with a non-conductive material akin to asbestos but resembling bakelite. Above the stone was a dome which could be rolled back for exposure to the sun. The concentration and magnification of the sun's rays through the many prisms was of tremendous intensity. So powerful was it that it could be regenerated and transmitted throughout the land in invisible beams similar to radio waves. Its energy was used to power ships at sea, aircraft and even pleasure vehicles. This was done by remote control through induction methods to the apparatus in the craft. Cities and towns received their power from the same source. The human body could even be rejuvenated through the moderate application of the rays from the crystals, and man often rejuvenated himself. Yet by misapplication, the firestone could be and was turned to destructive uses as well as the means for torture and punishment. Tuned too high, not intentionally, it contributed to the cause of the catastrophe. The rays combined with other electrical forces to start many fires deep within the earth, and volcanic eruptions were precipitated from nature's powerful storehouse of energy. Beautiful stone cities that glistened in the sunlight were scattered across the land. Among them were Amaki, Ake, and Poseidia, the latter being the most important city of the day. It was located on the last of the great islands designated by the same name. Here on the Bay of Parfa was one of the best and busiest seaports of the world. Water was supplied to the buildings of the city and the many pools and lagoons by viaducts built to nearby mountain streams. So huge and numerous were these conduits that they gave the appearance of a walled city. Water sports were highly popular. The buildings were constructed in tiers with gleaming, polished stones and intricate mosaics of superior craftsmanship. In the center of the city was the temple, around which much of the life of the children of the Law of One revolved. Supported by huge, semicircular columns of onyx, topaz and beryl inlaid with amethyst and other colorful stones, the elaborate temple reflected the rays of the sun from a variety of beautiful angles. Inside, the sacred fires of the altars burned constantly in the inner chamber. These mysterious flames produced rays, the knowledge of which was so soon to be lost, that were used in the treatments given the mixtures, animal-man creatures, for the removal of unwanted appendages. There was a large outer court which served as an assembly hall, and inner rooms for the prophets and the many priests, priestesses and attendants of the temple. The large priesthood was made up of the most learned men and women of the day, and some of them acted in the capacity of judges as well as spiritual and vocational instructors. The Atlanteans, and especially the Poseidians, studied the creative energies of the universe and penetrated the essence of nature's storehouse, the vibrations of plants, jewels and metals, the latter including their vibratory effect on the psychic and intuitive nature of man. Agriculture was highly advanced, as were astronomy and astrology. The Atlanteans calculated the meaning of numbers, the stars and the elements, and even knew the activity and effect of the morning dew. They learned how to neutralize the pull of gravity. They were aware of the mysteries of the origin of man and the 5 races, and they had a full understanding of the laws of metaphysics, of spiritual and scientific truths which are essentially the same. Second moon of Atlantis. What was called the second moon of Atlantis was, in fact, a massive crystalline satellite. It was designed and managed by the Arcturians priests of science Law of One. The crystalline satellite was a brilliantly constructed automatic area about 5 miles in diameter. It has been used since the days of the Golden Age of Atlantis, and served a variety of beneficial purposes. It amplified and controlled the various crystal beams sent by the fire, healing and energy crystals. It was a kind of computerized microchip which break, amplify and reflect beams of energy for use in agriculture, weather control, tide control, temples of healing and restoration and strengthening of existing ley energy generated by the crystal system. It was in the skies over Atlantis and appeared as a golden fruit, the moon, and thus was known as the second moon of Atlantis. Iridescent kaleidoscopic area anti-gravity plasma swirled around the sphere, and often seen in the fact what you call the northern lights. The crystalline satellite moon does not rotate in the orbit of the Earth. She moved programmable, self-governing and changing its position in order to perform its many tasks over Atlantis, Africa and the east coast of Brazil. Atlantis existed over 200,000 years. For the most part the time of Atlantis were epochs of light. Only the final phase, the period from 17,500 BC to 10,500 BC was in your terms, a dark era, but at the same time a valuable lesson. The decline of Atlantis. Up to this time, although material civilization rose to great heights, there was growing unrest among the Atlantean people. In a land of plenty, strife rather than peace became the rule. The altars came to be used for human sacrifice by those turning away from the original concept of the one God. Sun worship became prevalent. Only the dedicated, inner core of the children of the Law of One remained firm. Low standards of morality, sex indulgence and perversion became rampant. Poverty and hunger were widespread among the peasantry and working classes. There was a deteriorating of the physical and spiritual bodies, just as there was a wasting away of the mountains and valleys into the seas. In spite of material advancements and many scientific achievements, inner decay was to bring dispersion and finally annihilation to a proud, wicked, adulterous people. Some prophets have noticed that disaster is imminent. They endeavored to gather all the knowledge of the various nations of the world concerning the approaching disaster, and a meeting was called with this in view. Envoys from many lands came to Atlantis to pool their wisdom in a last attempt to avert the calamity, but the meeting and evangelistic campaign resulting from it were to no avail. Reconciled to the inevitable national cataclysm, the children of the Law of One made other plans: the search for suitable lands to colonize. Many expeditions went out for this purpose. The children of the Law of One also supplied leadership in the actual movements via land, air and water to the safer lands of Egypt, Honduras, Yucatan and other areas. Of special interest to them was the preservation of their religious tenets and records, and these were taken with them. By 10,700 BC, the country had reached the depths of moral and spiritual life, not in knowledge but in practice. Human sacrifice and sun worshipping were prevalent, as were adultery and corruption. The mixtures were used and abused. The forces of nature were misused. The sun crystals were cruelly adapted as a means of coercion, torture and punishment, and they became known among the common people as the terrible crystals. A new low in morality and human dignity had been reached. Violence and rebellion spread across the land. Then came the final catastrophe. Gigantic land upheavals shook the foundations of the earth. Great islands crumbled into the sea and were inundated. Only scattered mountain peaks remained to mark the sunken graves. Some people escaped. A few stayed behind heroically to aid others in the exodus to other lands. The majority were lost. By 9500 BC, Atlantis as a nation had vanished from the face of the earth. The Atlantean culture, however, did not entirely pass away. Although there were comparatively high civilizations in China, India and the Pyrenees, Atlantean influence was felt in many places at different times, just as their aggressive and progressive nature is now and will continue to be felt through reincarnation in the earth. The cycle of history often repeats itself, and the spirit of Atlantis has arisen once more, as will portions of the land itself. When changes that are to come about do take place, the island of Poseidia will be among the first high points to appear above sea level. New land will emerge off the east coast of the United States. The Bahama Islands are remnants of the peaks of Poseidia, a part of the once great continent before its breaking up into islands after the disaster. Near the islands of Bimini, 50 miles off the coast of Miami, Florida, there are buried under ages of sea slime the remains of an old Atlantean temple. It will one day be recovered. In Egypt, Atlantean influence was felt in the building of pyramids. Knowledge about the Atlantis civilization partly stored in the secret room under the Sphinx. There are to be found in Egypt, Bimini and Yucatan duplicate reports of Atlantean history. The records are identical and they will clarify some of the Old Testament accounts. Included in the records are the plans for construction of great crystals. Some of these remain have already been unknowingly recovered by unsuspecting archaeologists in the pyramids of Yucatan. We say to you, in fact, the golden period of Atlantis was the highest level of the light of consciousness ever achieved on the earth plane in any advanced civilization, higher than Lemuria, higher than Mu, higher than Rama. In fact, Lemuria has never reached such an extremely advanced level, which existed in the golden phase of Atlantis from 40,000 BC to 18,000 BC, time when gods walked with people, and they all knew joyful expression. It was a sacred time when many of you came as star children, and later chose biology and the lesson cycles of reincarnation on the blue planet called Earth. So when you consider Atlantis, not only remembered her sad fall, it was just a short phase of the magnificent ancient world, but we must not forget, as much you can gain by understanding this final phase, and expansive, it is time to remember. Our video ends here. Wish you always have the purity and purity of your soul. If you find a video interesting, press the like button and subscribe to follow the next video. Goodbye and see you again.